Today we're going to come to the end of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is going to conclude his Sermon on the Mount. Now for us, it's taken us a few weeks to finish this, but you could imagine if this was just all one sitting for those people that were hearing it. And what we're going to see today is that Jesus is going to give us choices. And I don't know about you, but I realize life is full of choices. So me being me, I thought, well, you know what? I'm just curious. How many choices does the average person make a day? So you know what I did? I Googled it. Because isn't that what everybody does? We Google it. So according to Google, it is estimated that the average adult makes 35,000 remotely conscious decisions each day. Wow. Just wait, it gets worse. So, me being me, and I thought, what does that play itself out to in a year? How many choices do you make a year? If you do the math, that is 12,775,000 choices in 1 year. If you're 10 years old, this is how many choices you've made. 127,750,000 if you're 10. Abby just turned 20, so she has made 255,500,000 choices. Anybody 30? Do I have a 30-year-old? 30-ish, right? Okay, 30. If you're 30, you've made 383,250,000 choices. 70. I'm getting there, but you got to wait. So, got to do the math, Rick. Come on. After 30, we're going by tens. It's 40. 40-year-olds. Any 40-year-olds? 40s. If you're 40, you've made 511 million decisions. 50. Connie, where is she? Sorry, love you. I'm not quite there. I haven't made this many decisions yet. So, Connie has made 638,750,000. And she's choosing to still love me right now. And that's the best decision of all. Anybody 60? John just turned 60. Remember we sang happy birthday to John. John has made 766,500,000 decisions. And he was telling me earlier the best decision of his life was when he met Sabrina and she said yes. That's what he was telling me with a smile on his face. 70. Rick, we're now to you. You have made 894,250,000 decisions in your life. Anybody 80? Oh, 80. Dave, you have made 1,022,000,000 decisions. And he said that the best decision is sitting right next to him. So, all right. I got a video for you about choice. Well,
you don't want anybody to tell you what to do.
Start from the beginning.
You like your choice. From day one, I moved to this country. I had my choice. I went to buy some groceries. They said, "You want paper or plastic?" Choice. Went to get some coffee. It said, "Regular or decaf?" Choice. Got out to the airport, this guy with a gun. He said, "Well, give me your wallet or I'll shoot you." Choice. Americans, you don't want anybody to tell you what to do.
That's good.
You like your choice.
We can stop the video.
From day one, I moved to...
Choice. We all have them. So to say life is full of choices, I think we would all agree is an understatement. You have seen, according to Google, how many decisions have been made just in this room. Now, me, being me, my first question for myself was, how many of those choices were the wrong ones? That was my first question. Which ones did I mess up? And the reason I think I ask myself that is because I think oftentimes that's immediately where we go to, is the wrong decisions that we've made. But that's not what God wants. He doesn't want us to automatically go to those wrong ones. But if we do end up there, what he wants us to know is that he's a God of second chances, and he redeems our wrong choices. But in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19, we read this. It says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live. This is God's heart for us. He sets before us life and death, blessings and curse, and he says, choose life. Here's what I love about God. God tells us that he's going to give us choices, but then he tells us which the right choice is to choose. I am so grateful for that because I'm still a little thick up here. I still have to try to figure out. Like, I get so confused. I don't have that many shoes, but I have so many shoes that I have to make a choice which shoes I'm going to wear on Sunday morning. Sometimes it gets confusing. Right now, I'm stuck with the black ones, just in case everybody is wondering. I went with the black ones. I had to choose which shirt I was going to wear. And I chose to wear this shirt that said adventure on it. And you're probably thinking he's lost his mind. He's preaching in a t-shirt. Yes, I've lost my mind, but I did it for a specific reason. I made a choice to wear this shirt because I want this shirt to be a reminder to you that life is an adventure. And when we make these choices that God gives us, the answer to what you're going to find is that adventure that God has called you to be a part of is so amazing. It's so much beyond what we could have ever imagined. And what we will see is that it brings life and it brings blessing, but it also impacts our offspring. My grandmother was complaining to me yesterday because it's Christmas time. And she says, I have all these grandkids. What am I going to do? And I even have great-grandkids. And I'm like, yeah, okay. You're still alive, though, so quit complaining. And then so I listened to her for a bit, and I got tired of it. I'm like, Nana, it's all your fault. Oh, you're right. I said, so just enjoy it. You get to see your great-grandkids. I mean, what a blessing is that? Why? Life is an adventure. And so today, Jesus sets before us the same choices he set before Israel. Life and death, blessing and curse. And then Jesus is going to bring to light 3 specific areas of our life that are going to demand decisions. So we're going to see things and we're going to have to make choices today. So if you don't like making choices, I'm sorry, today you're going to have to. You're going to have to make a choice. And so let's examine the choices that God gives us. And so in Matthew 7, verses 13 through 14, what we're going to see is that Jesus is going to tell us to choose between 2 paths. Verse 13, enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. Okay, Jesus spoke these words, not me. People don't like these words because sometimes they're difficult. And so as Jesus is concluding the Sermon on the Mount, he does it by addressing 2 paths that people have to choose from. You have the wide versus the narrow. The wide is easy, the narrow is difficult. One leads to death, one leads to life. That's it. So what you need to know is this. The path that you choose, if it's the easy path, be careful because it's wide. That's why it's easy, but it leads you to where you don't want to go, death and destruction. If you choose the narrow one, know this, it's not going to be easy. And I am found over 49 and almost 50 years of my life that the narrow path is difficult. To follow Jesus is difficult at times. But I've always found this, it's always led to life. So what do we need to understand about these choices? the first thing is we need to be careful of a few things. The first thing we need to be careful of is deception. There's going to be people out there that want to deceive you. There's an enemy out there that's going to try to tell you to take the wrong path. We probably think of it as the cartoon characters, one on each shoulder, the angel and the demon, or the angel and the devil, talking in your head. One's trying to tell you to go the wrong way, the other one's telling you to go the right way. That's kind of life. Be careful of being of deception. But you also need to know that the greatest danger is self-deception. Self-deception. You see, though Jesus doesn't mention it specifically here, the natural conclusion to what Jesus is talking about here is our eternity, heaven or hell. Where are we going to spend it? Now, I know that, in our time today, I'm not supposed to mention the word hell because it might make people feel uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable, good. You're probably meant to be feeling uncomfortable. Going to hell is not where we want to go. Right? Let's just be honest. I don't want to go to a place of eternal judgment. I don't want to be judged for the rest of my life, for all of eternity. But I can choose life. That's why Jesus said, one leads to life, one leads to death. Now choose life. Choose the narrow path. The broad way, though it's the easy way, though it's the popular way, doesn't mean it's the right way. Just because everybody's doing it is no proof that it's the right way. About 20 years ago, I was doing a camp out at Rollins Lake, and we took all the kids, there was 300 of them, and we took them all out in the middle of nowhere. And we get them in the middle of the forest, and we blindfold them all. And we're like, okay, here's the deal. You're going to have to get yourself back to the camp. Good luck, have fun, see you later. Oh, by the way, there's 3 people out there one's going to be a representation of the Holy Spirit, and the other 2 are going to be voices of the world, and you got to figure out who you're going to listen to and why, and you need to get back to camp. And then all the counselors stepped back and we watched them. It was hilarious. One girl in particular, I watched her and I watched the struggle. She knew she was following the wrong person. And so those people deceived her and told them to hug a tree and wait here, they'll come back for him. And so this whole group was sitting there hugging this tree because they were safe in their numbers. They were going the right way. They knew it, but she knew she was following the wrong person. And so after about 10 minutes, I went over to them and I said, you've been deceived. You can take off your blindfold. Come with me. After the whole thing was done, we broke up into small groups and we debriefed a little bit. And I asked her specifically, I said, hey, you knew you were deceived, didn't you? Yeah. I said, well, why did you do it? And her answer was amazing. She said, I just didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be alone. You see, just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean it's right. But you need to know this. If you choose life and you choose the narrow path, you'll never be alone. Because Jesus will always be with you. Now, this may be hard to swallow, but we live in a time where mass evangelism is kind of the main form of evangelism that people kind of tend to use, where a guy gets up and he gives this moving message and people are moved, and then the band comes up and they play the music to move you, and then they invite everybody to come forward, and everybody comes forward and they say, pray this prayer, and people pray this prayer, and they're like, okay, write this date in the Bible, and they write their date in the Bible, and then they leave. And they were moved. And at that moment, I believe that there was something that God was doing, that God was drawing them. But we have that parable of the seeds on the way, that were cast on the road. And we're told that when the cares of the world come up, though that seed came out, it was choked out and died, and they walked away. And maybe you're somebody that got saved at a Billy Graham crusade. And I'm not saying you can't be saved if you were at a Billy Graham crusade, but what I am saying is this. Just because somebody went forward at a Billy Graham crusade doesn't assure their salvation. They got to be walking on that path. They got to walk on that narrow path. And if wide is the path that leads to destruction, what we need to understand that narrow will be the path that leads to life. And we may feel like we're alone, we maybe feel like we're small in numbers, but God's people have always been a remnant. They've always been a minority in the world. And the way of life is narrow, lonely, and costly. And so what we need to do today is we need to test ourselves. We should test our salvation. We should figure out if our profession and confession of faith was true, or was it just an emotional response to the circumstances and the environment we found ourselves in. So how do we test our faith? We should ask ourselves this: has our profession of faith cost us anything? And what path do we find ourselves walking on because of it? You can't walk on two roads. You can't walk in two different directions at the same time. Ever tried it? I have. When I go out fishing, I'm a stream fisherman. I like to walk the rivers. And I don't know if you've ever noticed that the fishing holes on the other side are always the better fishing holes than the ones on your side. So I may be fishing on this side, but I really want to be fishing on that side. And the problem comes when I decide that where I am and the path that I am taking is the wrong path, and I try to cross the river to get to the other side. That's when what happens? You get hurt or you fall in. Why? Because you can't travel two different directions. Joshua, at the end of his life, in Joshua 24:14 and 15, he says this to the children of Israel. He says, "Now therefore, we're in the promised land. You've got your inheritance. Fear the Lord. Serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river." Interesting. "And in Egypt, serve the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Choice. Who are you going to serve? What path are you going to walk on? Wide or narrow? But know this, I can't make that decision for you. Joshua couldn't make that decision for the people of Israel. He told them, choose for yourself. Though the choice is individual, know this, the walk of faith is not, because you will never be alone, and it will always lead to life. Jesus gives you a choice, but tells you which to choose. He says, choose life. The second thing in verses 15 through 23, we got to choose between two trees. Verse 15, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, and a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them." If I was to take a poll on what was the one thing that stood out on that verse, or those few verses, you would probably say it's cut down and thrown into the fire. That's probably what you would choose. But here's what Jesus wants. After identifying the two paths, Jesus now gives us instruction on how to identify false prophets. Who are the false prophets? Those are the people that will be leading you down one path or another. The idea is that we will follow Jesus on the narrow path, not false prophets on the wide path. And the first thing we need to know about false prophets is they tend to magnify themselves. Look at me. Look at how good, they're probably the guys that introduce themselves to you like this. "Hi, I'm prophet so-and-so." Oh, nice to meet you. Don't be like me. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that right now. Because I always ask them this, are you a false prophet or a real prophet? I do. I'm just so sick of I'm prophet so-and-so. Well, I'm Shawn. Nice to meet you. Are you true or false? Tell me which one. Because I need to know. Don't do that. I don't recommend it, but that's just me. Jesus told us this. He says, when I leave, men will rise up and draw disciples to themselves. So we shouldn't be surprised that false prophets popped up. So be aware of any man who preaches about his own needs and promotes his own website. My thought is, if you're promoting your website and it starts with your name, might be a problem. Just me. Okay? You should always be asking this. When we come to this passage, what did Jesus say previous? And he said, don't judge. So you should ask yourself, how does this now fit into the context of what Jesus previously said about not judging? Know this. We are not to be judges. We're not judging them in the sense that we're condemning them and sending them to a final conclusion, which is what we talked about judgment being last week. But we are making judgment of what kind of fruit is coming from that person's life. You will see that. That's just going to happen. If you walked in my backyard and you looked up where we put one of our trees, you'll look and you'll see that thing that grows on there sure looks like a peach. Why? Because it's a peach tree. If you look behind it, you will see, I don't know what fruit that is, but it's not an apple tree. If you look to the left, you'll see our olive tree that has olives on it. Right? You would know and you can identify what kind of tree it is by the type of fruit that it's producing. That's not being judgmental. That's just identifying the fruit that's coming on a tree, and that's okay. We are not to be judges, but we're to look for fruit. But know this, everyone has flaws. Every tree has flaws. You've seen them. How many of you walked around big trees? I love walking around big trees. I love looking at those huge trees, and I look at some of them and I think, how are they still producing life? I mean, some of these trees look beat up, like the ones that have been struck by lightning. You're like, how is that still standing? And God, don't let it fall right now. Any other time when I'm not here, it's okay to fall, but right now, not a good time. But we begin to wonder. But you know what I've learned is that even a hurting and flawed tree can produce fruit. And what does that tell me? Even hurting and flawed people can produce fruit. We're not to look for flawlessness, but fruitfulness. What fruit is coming? The tree that has lots of leaves but no fruit is going to be cut down and cast into the fire. But we need to remember, we are not the ones to cut it down. We're not. And what if I was to tell you that being cut down isn't the end of the story? But before it gets cut down and before we look at that, we should be those who mend trees to try to bring restoration. Do you know that there's things that you can do to mend a tree? I didn't realize this until this last summer, spring. I look out there and all of a sudden our tree has this twig in between this cut that it had with this rope wrapped around it to try to restore where this thing came. And that tree produced more fruit this year than it ever has because it was mended. But a cut down tree has hope too. Why? Because it could be grafted in. It could be transplanted. Until it's consumed, until the final judgment comes, there's still hope even for a cut down tree to be grafted in to a source of life. False prophets don't always mean false preachers who proclaim a false gospel, but it also means a false profession of faith in Christ. they're not producing the right fruit, but there's still hope that they can be saved. There's still hope that they can be transplanted or mended. Though they may be wearing a spiritual mask, God's not done working. That's what we have hope in. But it goes on. Jesus goes on. And he says in verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. How do you hear that? I think how you hear that statement, I never knew you, really determines how you understand the heart of God. You could hear it as, how could you do the things that you did? I never knew you. It's an option. Or you could hear it like, man, you got it all wrong. You thought I wanted you to do all these things for me, where all I really wanted was to know you. I never knew you, but I wanted to. That's the heart of God. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. I think that's a statement from a broken heart of a God whose heart was broken for the people who he longs to be with. It's what should break our hearts to know that there's going to come a day where there's people who Jesus died for that have chosen to practice lawlessness. That God's going to have to tell them to depart from him. And he doesn't want to. Our hope is this, that day hasn't come yet. And that you and I are the means that God uses to let people know that the God who created them is pursuing them and loves them and wants to be with them and wants to have their life produce fruit. So let's not worry about that day, but let's consider today. And we need to ask ourselves this. What are the practices that we have adhered to in our life? Are they practices that say that we've chosen that narrow path? Are they choices that, are the things that we're practicing things that bring fruit? Good fruit? 2 Corinthians 6, 1-3, Paul says, we then, as workers together with him, also plead with you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For he says, in an acceptable time I have heard you, and in the day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. You see, we can worry about tomorrow and we can worry about judgment, but you know what? If we worry about that, we're not going to think about today. Today, that is the day of salvation. Jesus has already told us that tomorrow has enough problems of his own. So today, it's the day to make sure that not only you know Jesus, but that Jesus knows you. Notice many are going to say, well, we've prophesied. Have we not prophesied? God, again, be careful those that promote what they've done. Because it's not about knowing what you do or being known by what you say. It's about being known by Jesus. That's the key. Now, at first, this might seem very difficult to figure out. Who do I follow? How do I know if I'm producing the right fruit? You know what? It's really simple, actually. True faith in Jesus changes one's life and produces fruit that bring glory to God. What is that fruit? Galatians 5:22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love. I'm not an English major. I barely speak English. And if you talk to me for any time, you know I don't speak it very well. But he says the fruit of the Spirit, the is singular. So when we're looking for fruit in our lives, when we're inspecting fruit, what are we looking for? We're looking for this. Has the path we've chosen produced in us love? Are we more loving today than when we first chose to walk with Jesus? That's how you know you're on the narrow path. He then goes on to describe what love looks like. For the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. So love will produce in you a joy that is contagious, a peace that infects the entire room when you walk in. It means you're long-suffering. What does that mean? That means you're putting up with people. That's what it means. You're long-suffering. There's a reason it's a long word, and it says long-suffering. You should read that this way. Long-suffering. That's how you should read it, because it's a long time. You know what else? Kindness. We should be kind. Goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Why? Because against such things there is no law. That's what God is looking for. So you should ask yourself this: has your decision to follow Jesus made you more loving? If not, maybe you chose the wrong path. And is that love motivating you to serve? Because that's exactly what Jesus did. Jesus' love motivated him to leave heaven, come to earth, to serve humanity, to eventually redeem them by laying down his life. So today, choose to follow the one, Jesus, and then choose to follow the one that looks like him, the one that loves and serves like Jesus. That's what you should look for in a leadership at a church. Do they love me? Do they love Jesus? And are they serving like Jesus served? Sacrificial. The last thing that he's going to show us is that we need to choose between two foundations in verses 24 through 29. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house. And it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. And the rain descends, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on the house, and it fell. And great was its fall. And so it was, when Jesus had ended these sayings, that the people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. Now, the scribes back then, what they were known for is quoting a lot of people. Rabbi so-and-so and Rabbi Billy Bob Joe and Rabbi with one tooth, he said, and it was all about who they knew. I love going to Africa, because when you preach in Africa, you have to be simple. They don't care who Charles Spurgeon is. They don't care who John Calvin is. They don't care who Chuck Smith is. They don't even care who I am, which is great, because you know what they care about? They care about Jesus, and they want to know how he thinks about them. They want to know how he sees them. You see, it's not just what and how we build that matters. More importantly is where we build. We've all seen those houses on the side of the hills, and we envy the view, but we all say the same thing. I wouldn't want to live there when the earthquake comes, because they're going to have beachfront property. They're going to be in the water, right? But we started with two paths. They illustrate the start of our life of faith. He moved on to two trees that show us that growth is the result of a life of faith here and now. that we can produce fruit now. Now, the two foundations illustrate what takes place at the end when the storms come, where we've built. You see, life is not what we think of ourselves or even what others may think about us. What's important is, what does God think about us? And I love this one because Jesus tells me how not to be a fool. Like, I need that kind of help. Like, if you leave me to myself, I'm dumb. Like, I'm going to show you I am a fool every time. Like, don't expect me, apart from the grace of God, to show you anything other than foolishness. If you see anything that's not foolishness in my life, it's because of the grace of God. I used to use a term. I kind of coined it a long time ago. I think we need to bring it back to life. I am a lug nut. Right? I am. And lug nuts come in different types and shapes. You can even get designer lug nuts that need special keys to open them. That's the kind of lug nut I am. I need the special tool to untick that so you can get the wheel off to do the work on the car. That's me. Like, I'm that kind of special. And I'm so grateful that Jesus has the right wrench to remove the nut to do the job. So much so that he tells me, if you don't want to be a fool, build your house on the rock. I can do that. Yes. See, not only does Jesus tell us what needs to be done, he tells us how to do it. Not only does he give us choices, he tells us which choice to make. These two guys had so much in common. They both desired to build a house. They wanted it to be a nice house. They wanted to dwell in that house with their family. They had all the same dreams and aspirations. And you know what they both did? They both built this house. And the houses both look good. And everybody's like, man, these are great houses. Look at how sturdy they look. But both houses had storms hit them. Because you need to know this, it's not about if a storm's going to come, it's a matter of when. Like, I still have PTSD when I hear it's going to rain. When you've had your house like flood like multiple times, I mean, it used to be, I literally had 3 sump pumps set up, hooked up to a light switch to a light fixture outside, and I set my alarm to go off every 30 minutes when a big storm came so that I could wake up, turn on the pump, go lay on the couch, fall asleep for 30 minutes, wake up, turn it off because I didn't want to burn up my sump pumps, then sleep for another 30 minutes, to turn it back on. Now, we've done a ton of work on drainage in our house, and last year we had a lot of rain, and it worked. I was like, thank you, Jesus. I still didn't sleep. I heard it's raining tomorrow. I freaked out. I'm like, no! I'm out there blowing leaves. I'm out there, I'm like, I'm not going to sleep tonight because I'm worried it's going to rain. Just how it is. Storms come. Storms go. But if our house is built upon a rock, it's sturdy, it's not going to fall. It's not the external looks that make a difference. What makes the difference is the foundation. And the successful builder is the one who set his house on a firm foundation. Now, that doesn't mean that your house isn't going to need maintenance. It doesn't mean that the roof's not going to leak at times. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to continue to upkeep it. No, you're going to have to do those things. But what you have assurance of is this. Those types of maintenance can work, but we have hope that that house is still going to stand and not come tumbling down. And so Jesus says, be careful where you build your house. Build it on something tried and true. Build it upon the rock. And what did Jesus say? I am the rock. Build it on me. So who's the one who built it on the sand? It was one that heard the word, knew that the storms were coming, but didn't do what the word told them. You have a choice today. Where are you going to build your house? Jesus said build it on the rock, but you could still choose to build it on the sand. You have that choice. But know this, hearing the truth and agreeing with the truth is definitely not the same as practicing the truth. You have to build on the rock. Throughout the Bible, false believers always walk away as soon as the storms come. Know that. Know that. So today, you have to choose, number one, which path you're going to take. Are you going to walk the wide that leads to death, or the narrow which leads to life? Jesus already told you which one you should take. He said, choose life. Today you have to examine the fruit in your life to assure that you're walking the appropriate path. Are you producing good fruit? Bad fruit? No fruit. Meaning this, are you loving? Is love what marks your life? A sacrificial serving love, a love like Jesus. You need to ask yourself, where's my house built? Where's my house built? Is it built upon the rock? Am I one who hears the word of the Lord and does them? Or do I hear the word and just decide I'm going to do my own thing? One of the things that I've found is that, you know what, you may have started off and built your house on the sand. And it may be extra work, but you can lift that house up and you can pour a firm foundation. But know this, that work isn't going to be that hard because Jesus will do all the heavy lifting. And he actually lays the foundation for you. You just got to let him be the contractor to do the work. And you know, here's the crazy thing. He even paid the bill. So you have hope. So, who is it that chooses the narrow path? Whose life is it that produces fruit? And whose house is it that is built on the rock? Is it yours? Today you need to make a choice. You need to choose who you'll build your life on, which path you will travel, and you need to evaluate what fruit you're producing. But know this, God has given you what you need to make the right choice because he's given you Jesus. And Jesus says this, follow me. I'll take you down the right path. Abide in me, and you will produce loving fruit. Stand firm on me, and you'll be on a firm foundation, and your house will never fall. So in essence, what Jesus is doing today, what Christmas is all about, is us invited to the greatest gift that was ever given to us, and that is Jesus. So will you put your faith in Jesus today? Will you trust him? Will you allow him to do what he longs to do? And that is to know you and be known by you this Christmas season. But know this, Jesus loves you, pursues you, and will always be there for you.